you get a text on Apple phone. Sometimes it says maybe at the top. It says, right, maybe Harry Wilson.
Yeah.
And it says, maybe Gregg Berhalter. And I'm like, Gregg Berhalter, this is how unattached I was, guys. This is a guy I've been following my whole life. Maybe Gregg Berhalter. I'm like, who's Gregg Berhalter? Gregg Berhalter. I go to my wife. I was like, hey, who's Gregg Berhalter? I just got a text from him. She goes, I don't know. You've been doing a lot of speaking. You always give your book away. Like you probably said, I'm like, no. Like, so I Google, right? Gregg. I'm like, hold on. Greg, the Greg, like Greg, it's Greg.
It's Greg.
And
of course it's Greg.
Yeah. He texts me, hey, Travis, thanks for the book. I look forward to reading it. And I go, yeah, thanks, Greg. Would love to connect sometime. And I'm thinking, sweet, never going to hear from him again. I got his cell phone, right? I can sell this on eBay. I can sell his number, whatever.
That's right.
Make a few, bones off of this. And now again, it's over. Nothing's going to come of it. Thanksgiving comes and goes. Like a week and a half later, boom, maybe Gregg Berhalter. Hey, Travis, do you have time to connect today? Yeah, I think I got time to connect today in a meeting right now. And so we jump on the phone and, I'm, trying to not be nervous and we're talking and it's really, really pleasant. I'm starting to tell him my story a little bit and he cuts me off, guys. And he goes, whoa, you don't need to tell me your story. He goes, I read your book. I was like, oh, great. Hey man. Well, hey, I know you're super busy. What's going on? Yeah. And he's like, and then it was like, hey, I loved your ideas. I love how you think about, the mental side of things. I love how you think about the team and the cultural side of things. I'm looking for someone who can come in and be intentional about the culture I'm trying to create with the national team, right? Is that something you're interested in? And I was like, oh yeah, I think I could be interested in that, right? Yeah. And he asked me the question, right? Any freelance worker wants to hear. This is at the end of 2019. He says, how does your year look? And I'm like, flexible, really, really flexible.
Welcome to Limitless Minds, the podcast where curiosity meets greatness. Each week, co-hosts DJ Eitzen and Harry Wilson sit down with some of the most exceptional individuals across sports, business, and beyond. From world-class athletes and peak performance coaches to visionary CEOs, entrepreneurs, and influential authors, they dive deep into the stories and strategies that drive extraordinary success. If you're ready to discover what it takes to be truly limitless and push beyond your own limits, you're in the right place.
All right. On today's episode of Limitless Minds, we have Travis Thomas, an elite mindset coach, author, and speaker with a background in improv comedy. He's worked with elite organizations, including Major League Baseball teams, IMG Academy, and the U.S. Men's National Soccer Team. Travis is known for his dynamic approach. It's different because of that improv background. He blends performance psychology and improvisational principles to help individuals and teams unlock their potential. And he's also the author of a book called 3 Words for Getting Unstuck. Live, yes, and. He's a great friend of ours, a Limitless Minds coach, and one of the best in the best. So enjoy. All right. Well, we are excited. Travis Thomas, what's up, man? Good to see you.
Gentlemen, great to be here. Good to see you both. Yes, absolutely. No, thank you.
Yeah, I like that spiral staircase back there, man.
You like that? You like that? Not bad for a little rental, little apartment rental in St. Louis. Yeah, it's just a green screen. It's not real. It's not real. It's just a decal on the wall. Yeah.
Is that right? Oh, nice.
No.
you mentioned the rental in St. Louis. So I know that you spent a number of years in Florida and South Florida, and then but also in St. Louis, and I know you got some kiddos that are out that way. So where like what's home right now? Like where you planting the flag?
Yeah, no. So St. Louis is home probably for the last 2.5 years. But like you said, Florida for kind of the 20 previous, and we still own, our home is in Florida, but we're just renting in St. Louis because our youngest, who's a junior in high school, we're kind of here until he finishes high school. All 3 of my kids came up here to finish high school. It's a boarding school I used to work at, probably 15 plus years ago, and they all have fond memories of it. So they have friends and family and fond memories of this school. Called the Principia School. And so they're all finishing there. And then I have 2 in college who are actually, one is 2 blocks away at St. Louis University. She loves that her dad and mom rented an apartment 2 blocks off the campus.
I bet that's her favorite.
Oh my
thing.
God, she just loves it. No, she and her boyfriend come down for dinner on Sundays, which is great. And I'm doing some work with St. Louis University soccer team still. And so we're 2 blocks off of campus. So she's a senior there, a freshman at my wife and I's alma mater called Principia College, which is about an hour outside of St. Louis. So we get to see our son quite a bit. And then our youngest, like I said, is a junior in high school. So St. Louis for now. And then after that, do we go back to Michigan roots? Do we go back to Florida? Do we just throw a dart somewhere else? I don't know. It's all up in the air. That's how we roll.
I love it, man.
You got options.
Well, you got options. Options are good. And before we kind of get into the meat of this thing, I need some, I'm going to start this thing off because I need some advice on something. So
you got it.
I woke up this morning. It's a little bit of a confession. So I woke up this morning.
Yeah.
Through, I had a long day yesterday. I was traveling, driving, had some windshield time, right?
Yeah.
Get home late, exhausted, go to bed, sleep hard, right? Skip my workout, which is not typical. And
You're
get up
forgiven.
and get dressed, right? Get the kids to school. I'm 2 hours into my morning, right? And I've been in public. Okay. So I've been to the coffee shop. I took back my rental car.
Yeah.
Met with somebody real quick.
There we go.
Get to my office and realize that this polo shirt was inside out.
Oh, I love it.
Time.
Oh, love
so
that.
So the polo logo is on the other side.
Yeah.
Right, than it should be.
Yeah.
The seams are showing. So give me some advice as a mental fitness coach. How the hell do you bounce back from that?
Yeah.
First thing in the morning.
Yeah. The beautiful thing is that I'm sure as you were going through your routine, you were doing with confidence, right? I know you had that Harry Wilson, you came to the coffee shop good. And you were good. Chest up, a lot of eye contact,
bro.
Right? Talking to my Starbucks lady,
right? So you don't have to do anything, Harry. You're like, hey, you can do the quick little change. And like, oh shoot, hey, I hope But the reality is, you just probably impacted a dozen people who were sitting at home, right, going, man, can you believe that Harry Wilson came in and he decided to reverse his polo, and that dude was just owning it. And so I love it. And so you're going to start to see him pop up all over town.
It was embarrassing. It was embarrassing. Let's be honest. Like, it was very embarrassing. And then to take your shirt off, like in your office, which, by the way, I'm in a shared workspace. To take your shirt off and reverse it and have to just kind of sit in that. It's a good way to start the day.
Well, the truth of the matter is, when I think of the ability, from an improvisational standpoint, to get up on stage and be okay with a real possibility that you're not going to be funny, right? That's what, as a comedian, as an improviser, you have to come to grips. It's just like as an athlete, like, you better know that you're going to lose a lot. And so there is an embarrassment and a humiliation that comes with that. And so, and when you do that enough, you gain sort of that embarrassment tolerance or humiliation tolerance, which you also realize, like, not that big of a deal. Like, you could have, it would have been best if you had noticed that you had it on inside out in the coffee shop and you're like, hey, everyone, my bad, real quick, and just changed it in the middle. And people have been like, wow. Like, that dude just doesn't care. That's a level of confidence that people aspire to right there. Yeah.
Well, just thought I'd share with you guys. He's what you got to do. TT, our mental
fashion coach. That's what he is, not the fitness.
Oh,
fashion. He's got it all.
Well, both of you guys are crushing on that front.
Appreciate that, man.
Well, listen, I mean, you mentioned improvisation, and certainly a really cool and unique part of your background. And I'd love for you to, for those that don't know you, and they may have, if they haven't found you across kind of socials and across all the things you're doing, we've spent some time with you before on kind of the previous iteration of this podcast. But for those that haven't checked in or know who you are, just give us a quick background and that road from Flint, Michigan to Improv to coaching some of the best and brightest athletes in sports and then organizations. Just kind of maybe give us that kind of that story arc real quick.
Yeah, so I'll give you guys a quick version and just kind of like it's very full circle for me, because obviously I get to work, spend a lot of time in high level sports now at the collegiate and professional level, and so that's just such a passionate thing for me. But that's what I grew up in. Growing up in Flint, Michigan, sports are such a big part of sort of the fabric of that city and that community over the years. And that was a big part of my life as a family. And then just growing up playing playing lots of sports and then falling in love with soccer specifically and following my dream and playing soccer in college and coaching a little high school when I got out of college. And then leaving that and kind of going into the professional world, trying to figure out what that was going to look like. And in the process of doing that, sort of finding improvisation and improvisational comedy just as a hobby, just as something that living in Boston, and found a theater that was new and amazing, and was just so impressed with them. And they offered classes. So, 6 levels of classes over a year and a half. And now I'm a trained, professional improviser. And then now I'm auditioning and making their touring company, and then making their main stage, and then teaching in their teaching in their training center. And just loving sort of this new passion that felt very much like sports. But at the same time, it was opening new insights that transcended the stage, opening new insights into my mindset, into relationships, into culture, and organizational side of things. And in the back of my mind, it was like, wow, this has huge sports implications as well. But then, if you fast forward 6 or 7 years later, when I'm now really looking at wanting to get back into coaching and speaking, because that's always been a big part of who I was, I realized that I had this new unique tool of improvisation to kind of look at things uniquely. And the more I sort of brought that into the work that I was doing now as an executive coach or a life coach, and then back into sports as a mindset and leadership coach, I realized that so much of those improvisational principles were relevant, and actually uniquely relevant when it comes to performance. And so I'm still growing, I'm still learning, I'm still figuring out new things all the time. But it was such an unintended and unintentional path that eventually brought me back full circle now to, working with amazing organizations, working with you all, and working with, the national team and professional teams and college teams, and using a lot of those same ideas from improvisation to help individuals and teams kind of break through some of that resistance or some of those obstacles.
That's great. That's great. You mentioned Flint earlier. You kind of breezed through Flint, though, man. You can't breeze. You can't breeze through Flint. I bring Flint up because Flint's often known for his perseverance. Ability to be able to bounce back, grit. And so tell me some of those early things that you learned in Flint, and how that influenced where you are today.
Yeah. Thanks, CJ. Yeah, Flint. It'll always be home. I still have family in the area back home in Flint, and I grew up in Flint in a really interesting time. In the 80s is when I was a kid, and 80s, Flint was, I think, the second largest city in Michigan to Detroit my entire childhood. And then overnight, it became a ghost town, because once General Motors started closing up shops and moving jobs to Mexico and different areas, Flint literally, neighborhoods were like tumbleweeds overnight. People just packed up the truck and left. And my dad had a business, hamburger restaurants in Flint. And so it was like a community business, a community staple. Like my dad was like the unofficial mayor of Flint. And so growing up and being in my dad's stores, which, and just being, knowing the employees and growing up with the employees and growing up with the community really, and then seeing it go through such a difficult time, and having a business that relied on that, we experienced firsthand sort of the hardships of what Flint has sort of endured, over the years, and to see it just be, it's a Midwestern industrial, city that has had a hard go, but just, continues to battle and rebound. And then you have the water crisis from a few years ago, and it's this, can a city get a break? Yeah. But growing up in that environment, I think the reason that I do a lot of the work that I do today was just, even though I didn't feel like I grew up with a lot of hardship, I grew up in a community that did, and and living in neighborhoods where it was very real, and then being in my dad's business, the relationship side of things just always struck a chord in me, and I always knew that I just wanted to help people. I didn't know I don't know what skills or gifts I had that could help people. I knew I wanted to. And growing up, it just kind of shows up as sports and the relationships that you have with your friends. And I'm still close to a lot of the kids that I grew up with. And, but yeah, there's just, there's just a real authenticity to growing up, and a humility, I think, that comes up to growing up in one of those areas. And Flint was definitely that for me.
So, I mean, so when we profiled that you have worked with, some of the best and brightest organizations, teams in the world, from sports to business. You spent time, at IMG Academy. You spent time in Major League Baseball. You spent time with the US men's national soccer team. And we can talk, a little bit about all those stages. But I'd love to just kind of learn and share with the audience, like, how the hell do you get into that space, right? How do you, I'm truly like, how do you get into that? Like, what was that first step from in a mental conditioning performance standpoint and role? And then how did that kind of catalyze the journey, start working with like professional teams and like some of the best and brightest, like literally in the world? Can you just kind of set that up for us?
Yeah, I mean, like most things, right? There's a series of steps, and there's a series of, leap in the net will appear, right? Is the mantra that my wife and I live by, an old African proverb. And, I would say that I've never had a plan, but I've definitely had a purpose. And that purpose has always kind of kept moving me forward. My purpose is to inspire myself and others to live their authentic brilliance. You guys have probably heard that 1,000 times at this point. It hasn't changed. It hasn't changed. It's the same purpose. And so, when you're committed to purpose, sort of what happens is less important than how you're showing up. And as long as you keep showing up on purpose, whatever happens is going to be fine, because you're going to be on purpose. You're the unchangeable that exists in the changing, which is everything else outside of you. And so I was committed to like my purpose, but what happened as a result of that, I was unattached to. And so I knew I loved sports, and I knew I loved speaking, and I knew I loved coaching, but where that took me and took us as a family, I was unattached to. And so now it's just a matter of showing up each day and being on purpose, doing the work, working your butt off, and seeing what happens. And so, really, once, from improvisation, as I got into wanting to do speaking, wanting to do coaching, and then that's a tough road to hoe. And so a few doors started opening, and then I, started working at that boarding school that I referenced earlier. And then I left that after, 3 or 4 years, and tried to go on my own again. And as a coach and as a speaker, and then I get an email from a friend at IMG Academy that says they were hiring for a leadership and improvisation coach. Like, I thought that was a joke. And just so you all, like, timeline wise, I knew who Trevor Moawad was, but he and I hadn't met. And so as I'm interviewing for the job at IMG, and I'm like, dude, if there's someone interviewing for this job that has the leadership and improvisation background, those two don't tend to go together.
Right.
I'm like, they can have the job. You talk about being confident in a job interview. I'm like, all right, like, if there's someone else,
you walked in with your shirt inside out. Like,
yeah, I did. I did. I pulled the Harry Wilson. And lo and behold, so I got the job at IMG as a leadership coach, and then again, another level up, because now I'm working with great athletes and organizations and other coaches like a Josh Lifrak, and so once I leave there after 3 years to go off on my own again, for the third time. Now I'm well connected because of IMG, and I've got friends who are in the industry and working in different college and professional sports, and they're opening doors to bring me in to do work. And so, my resume is growing, and then Trevor Moawad and I meet, after I leave IMG, and he starts introducing me and using me for work. I meet you guys. And so I'm starting to get busier in the sports world and in the corporate world. But the big leap, guys, which is really funny, which is a fun story, which when I left IMG in 2015, I was inspired to kind of write my first book, right? So my first book came out in 2016, which is 3 words for Getting Unstuck, Live Yes And. My company is Live Yes And, which is still on Amazon, by the way. Go check it out. I bet it's just great stocking stuffer. And so I self-publish and write that book, the book that no one was asking for. So I write that book, and now I've got like a glorified business card to kind of share my story and how improvisation is relevant in sports and performance and in your personal life and in the corporate world. And so now, so that book is helping me get my foot in the door. But 2019, I'm dancing with you all. And we're just still kind of doing this thing. And the women's national team had just hired a new coach. And it hit me. I'm like, oh, I should send him my book. Mm-hmm. And then it hit me like, oh, shoot. So Gregg Berhalter, who was the men's coach, had been on the job for about a year at that point. And I'm like, I don't think I ever sent Gregg my book. I'll send them both a book. So guys, I remember I'm standing in my living room in Florida. And for authors out there, they will tell you sending a cold book to somebody does nothing. It is the worst waste of $10. Just throw it out the window, right? Time. And so sending a cold copy does nothing. The only thing I ever got from sending a cold copy to a coach was a handwritten note by Coach Krzyzewski thanking me for sending him the book, which we know was written by his personal assistant. So Coach K never even got that book either, right? So I'm sitting in the family room and I'm like, I should send those two guys my book. And then, in Limitless Minds, we talk about the stinking thinking and the negative radio station that pops up in your head. And I'm going, I should send them the book. And the little voice, that little devil goes, Travis, they don't need your book. They don't want your book. You're wasting your time. Why are you doing this? They're never going to get it anyway. Yeah. And I literally put the books down and I started to walk away, and thank God that other angel message in your head goes, wait a second, man, like, who cares? It's going to take you 5 minutes to write a personal note. It's going to take you 10 minutes to go to the post office. Just send the books. Yeah. And thank God I listened to that message that morning. So I went back to the desk. I took the books out. I wrote a handwritten note in each one, and to Gregg, who is the men's coach, I said, hey, Gregg, always been a big fan of you and the national team. When I was at IMG Academy, I worked with a few of the players who are on the national team now. Would love to connect at some point. Mm-hmm. Boom, mailed them both up. Sent them to the U.S. Soccer House in Chicago. I had no personal connection. There's no chance these guys are even going to get the book. So it's that whole idea. I talk about being unattached. As soon as I left the post office, it was over. It was done. Nothing's going to happen. But at least I did the thing that I said I was going to do. Yeah. And then a week later, I was working out at Planet Fitness because that's how I roll. And so I'm working out. I'm on the Stairmaster, and I get, you get a text. On Apple phone, sometimes it says maybe at the top. It says, right, maybe Harry Wilson. Yeah. And it says maybe Gregg Berhalter. And I'm like, Gregg Berhalter, this is how unattached I was, guys. This is a guy I've been following my whole life. Maybe Gregg Berhalter. I'm like, who's Gregg Berhalter? Gregg Berhalter. I go to my wife. I was like, hey, who's Gregg Berhalter? I just got a text from him. She goes, I don't know. You've been doing a lot of speaking. You always give your book away. Like, you probably, I'm like, no. Like, so I Google, right? Gregg. I'm like, holy Gregg, the Gregg, like Gregg, it's Gregg.
It's Gregg. Of course it's Gregg.
Yeah, he texts me, hey, Travis, thanks for the book. I look forward to reading it. And I go, yeah, thanks, Gregg. Would love to connect sometime. And I'm thinking, sweet, never going to hear from him again. I got his cell phone, right? I can sell this on eBay. I can sell his number, whatever. That's right. Make a few, bones off of this. And now again, it's over. Nothing's going to come of it. Thanksgiving comes and goes. Like a week and a half later, boom, maybe Gregg Berhalter. Hey, Travis, do you have time to connect today? Yeah, I think I got time to connect today. In a meeting right now. And so we jump on the phone, and I'm trying to not be nervous, and we're talking, and it's really, really pleasant. I'm starting to tell him my story a little bit, and he cuts me off, guys, and he goes, whoa, you don't need to tell me your story. He goes, I read your book. I was like, oh, great. Hey, man. Well, hey, I know you're super busy. What's going on? Yeah. And he's like, and then it was like, hey, I loved your ideas. I love how you think about, the mental side of things. I love how you think about the team and the cultural side of things. I'm looking for someone who can come in and be intentional about the culture I'm trying to create with the national team. Right? Is that something you're interested in? And I was like, oh, yeah, I think I could be interested in that. Right? Yeah. And he asked me the question, right, any freelance worker wants to hear. This is at the end of 2019. He says, how does your year look? And I'm like, flexible, really, really flexible. Yeah. And so that, it started off as a 6-month trial period with the national team, which turned into 3 years, which turned into me, being there for every game and every training over our 3-year period, and living a childhood dream as a soccer player of going to a World Cup in Qatar and being on staff, and and just having that entire experience of, to quote Alexander Hamilton, to be in the room where it happens. I guess that would have been Aaron Burr, my bad. So to be in the room where it happens, and just to get to do the things that I'm passionate about, right? It was about relationships and culture and helping people and being a part of something. And all of that, guys, is like, what if I hadn't sent the damn book?
Wow. Yeah.
What if I listened to that 80% of negativity that we know that we're wired for, that little voice in your head that says, why are you wasting your time? And I think about that, and if you want to backtrack it even more, it's funny, I kind of write this up. I have just so you guys know, I have a new book coming out at the end of the year.
Let's go.
Limitless Minds is all over it. Trevor, Limitless Minds is all in it. It's called Confidence is Overrated. And so I share this. I share this story in the book because here's the kicker. Going back to IMG Academy, I left in 2015. At the beginning of 2015, I was supposed to go speak to the U.S. national team in California because one of the coaches saw me speak on campus, and he said, "Hey, would you be interested to fly you out to LA right now to go speak to the national team?" This is 2015. And I was like, oh my gosh, it'd be a dream come true. And then 2 days later, he comes back to me and he says, hey, the schedule has changed. They don't have time. And I just crushed, right? Don't put all your eggs in one basket, but I did. And so, I'm crushed. And we, exchanged pleasantries. And I called my coworker. There's a Starbucks. Funny thing, there's a Starbucks like two miles off campus, and I would do a lot of work there because we shared an office and we don't get work done. And I said, hey, I'm going to start off in Starbucks this morning before coming in. All I really wanted to do is go to Starbucks and sulk and pout, right? And, sipping iced coffee and just drowning my tears. And I'm sitting there, and this parent plops down next to me who I'd seen a few times on campus. And I'd never met him, but his son was a tennis player, and he plopped down next to me. I swear to you, he plopped down next to me, guys, and he goes, hey, man, we've never met. He introduces himself, and he says, I've sat in a few of your sessions. He goes, I really enjoy you. You're really good. I was like, oh, I appreciate that. Thanks so much. He goes, yeah. He goes, hey, if I'm overstepping my bounds here, I apologize. He goes, but you're not going to be here long. I was like, excuse me? He goes, yeah. He goes, yeah, I mean, IMG's great, but I'm sure there's bigger things for you to do out there. He goes, you're not going to be here long. I was like, oh, wow, I appreciate that. And he goes, you know what you need to do? You need to write a book. I was like, okay. He goes, it doesn't need to be a good book. He goes, but just write a book. He goes, because now you're a speaker, but now you're an author speaker. Right. And I was like, oh, yeah. He goes, yeah, I did the same thing with my wife. She's a fitness guru. So he's telling me kind of like, his thing. And he goes, I just want to share that with you. He got up and left, and I'm sitting in that Starbucks in January of 2015. And I'd been wanting to write a book connecting the improvisation to performance, but it's like timing is everything. And I sat there and I'm like, it's time for me to write this book, and it's probably time for me to move on. And I opened up the laptop in Starbucks in January 2015 and wrote the introduction to my first book. And then in May, I left IMG again to go off on my own to take that scary leap again, right? Yeah. So the thing that I didn't share with the Gregg Berhalter story is when he and I were on the phone, and he about the opportunity. This is Christmas of 2019. He says, hey, I'm going to be in Orlando for the holidays. He goes, would you drive up and meet me? We can talk about this further. So we met in a coffee shop, and I get to the coffee shop. He's in the back of the coffee shop. He waves me down. We go in the back, and we have our meeting, and he offers me a job with the national team. We get up, we leave, take a selfie with him, which, by the way, guys, it was a Starbucks. It was a Starbucks in December of 2019. In January of 2015, I wrote that book because I just got told I wasn't going to go speak to the national team.
Yeah.
And for almost 5 years later, I'm meeting at a Starbucks.
That's so great.
With the head coach saying, hey, because of your book,
so great,
do you want to come and be a part of the team?
That's amazing.
So write the book, send the book. And when I say write the book, for anyone listening, it's not a book. It's like whatever the thing is that's just in that heart, that's in your soul, that you want to do. You gotta put that stinking thinking in the back seat and just keep moving forward.
That's so great.
I love that, dude. That's a great story, man. We've known you now for 5 years. I don't think I've ever heard that story, and so that's pretty cool. And I love that bridge from, kind of the door closing. It's seemingly right.
Yeah.
Finding kind of another path, a way to kind of iterate on things that you've been interested in, and then that very thing, bringing you to this really dope opportunity that all of a sudden that door that was closed is like opens back up again.
Yeah, totally. And the funny thing is that, it wasn't like once that first door closed, it wasn't like the only way to open the door again is I'm going to have to do this and then do this and then do this. It was like, no, like there was no plan. Like I said, there was no plan. It was that door closed. Thank God for that little guardian angel who sat down next to me and gave me that little spiritual nudge.
Yeah.
And it was like, oh, this is what I'm supposed to do, not because of what's going to happen. Because we don't know what's going to happen.
That's right.
But I knew that, oh, this is inspiring me or motivating to take that next right step. And the next right step at that time was, hey, maybe it's time you actually start writing that book. Yeah. And again, it's not like, and a year later, I was working for the National. No, it was 5 hard years. It was 5 hard years. And it's not like the book I self-published. It's not like it was a national bestseller and everyone heard about it. Heck no. I sent the cold copy that never works.
Right.
And I'm sure he gets a dozen books sent to him every day at the US Soccer House. And why did he open mine? And why didn't he read mine? And so it's like, there's so much, when you're living your passion, you're living your purpose, and you guys know this, running a business, that you're committed to your purpose, but you have to surrender to the result.
Yep.
And that's really, really hard to do, but that's really where true freedom is.
There's so much awesomeness to unpack there. You mentioned early on a couple times now, IMG Academy, and you mentioned some names, Josh Lifrag, Trevor Moad. Is there something, you spent 3 years there, is there anything there that really stands out that you've carried with you, that you learned, that you think is special about the IMG Academy, or anybody that goes there would walk away with?
Yeah, it's funny. I always used to describe working at IMG is, you remember the This Is ESPN commercials? Mm-hmm. Those are my favorite of all time, where it's like, it's all the celebrities, it's all the athletes on ESPN grounds. Yeah. And they're all in uniform and everything. And so working at IMG Academy was like being in This Is Sports Center commercial, right? Because you're on this, essentially a college campus that's just filled with athletes from like 9 or 10 different sports from all over the world. And so you jump on a tram and you've got every nationality, you've got every country, you've got every sport represented. And you're just kind of like, this is kind of like, Disneyland for athletes. And, you're like, oh, you're walking across campus. You're like, oh, hey, like, I remember like Kobe was on campus one day because he was getting his VR levels with the Gatorade Institute or whatever. And then like, oh, hey, there's Amari Stoudemire. And like, oh, hey, you go into the weight room and there's the 10 best track and field athletes in the world all working out. And like, hey, Tim Tebow's here. You're like, what is this place? But so the cool thing is that everything that you need as an athlete is it's under that one roof. The resources are there. It's all the accessibility to everything that you need is there. But we know, though, there's a difference between accessibility and actually taking advantage of those resources. And so I think one of the things that stood out to me was, you've got this place where if anyone is really serious about their pursuit, they have everything they need under one roof, but who's going to take advantage of it? And then we know that there's plenty of people and kids and athletes that will never be able to afford to go have an experience like that. And they have to make do with what they have. And they've got to find a way to to follow that dream without the most expensive resources and everything in the world. Basically, guys, it's Rocky IV. It's Rocky IV, right? You got Drago, who has world-class technology and a gym, right? And it looks like some steroids as well. So you got Rocky IV, and then you got Stallone, who says, I'm going to Siberia to train with logs, chopping wood, no heat, and I'm going to climb mountains in the snow. And it comes down to, so what you get to see is, you can put all of the resources, all the tools, and all the gifts in front of somebody. If the commitment, if the heart isn't there, it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. Yeah.
And you can also take someone and put them in an environment with none of the gifts and none of the resources. But if the heart and the commitment is there, there is a way. Doesn't mean it's easier.
Yeah.
But there is a way. And
were you able to spot those, the ones that you knew were going to make it versus the ones that weren't? Could you spot those folks, those kids?
Yeah. I mean, I think, it's when you're around it enough, you see the kids that, and this is not going to be a shock to anybody. Like the kids and the athletes that just love the grind and they love the process. It's that daily process of it's not the scoreboard. It's the daily process of just committing and getting better on a day-to-day basis. But there's a get to, not a have to mentality, right? I get to train today instead of I have to train today, right? I remember I would work with the U17 national team boys every couple of weeks. Right. And so these kids, they're it was the residency program. They would live at IMG Academy. So, 30, 35 of your top, 16-year-olds in the country trying to make the youth national team. And these kids are there, they're living. And so all they do is eat, breathe, and, soccer, eat, breathe, and sleep soccer day in and day out. And then I would just I was always on campus and I would go out to the fields. And in their off time, you would see 5 or 6 of them on the soccer field working on free kicks or working on moves or just doing, this was what they were doing in their free time. It wasn't because they had to, it's because they get to. And so just like with anything, I think there is a line of compulsiveness or obsession, which I do think is unhealthy. And hopefully the work that I do, I try to help people kind of find that sweet spot of what you do, right? You're not what you do. And so to be able to commit fully to something without also giving your whole self to that something in the process. But when we talk about those next level performers, I think it's those people that find the joy in the day-to-day process, which is where we all know is where the growth happens. Yeah. And so when the setbacks come, yeah, it's a setback, but I'm going to get up tomorrow and I'm just going to continue to get better every day. Josh Lifrak uses, I love Josh, uses the analogy of a raffle, right? And I've used this with teams a lot this past year or so. Like, let's just pretend that at the end of the week, right? Let's say in our organization, everyone starts the week with one raffle ticket. And at the end of the week, we're going to draw a raffle ticket from the bowl, and whatever ticket they're going to get like a $10,000 bonus for the week, right? And
you sound like Elon Musk. He sounds like Elon Musk right now. He's doing the $1 million raffle.
Wouldn't that be great? We're gonna try this at Limitless Minds as well. Okay, so all right. So everyone starts off with one ticket, so you get a ticket for doing nothing. But here's the thing: as you go through the week, every time you make a good decision, every time you make a good choice, every time you make a good behavior, you get another ticket. So you go through your day, and I'm committed to making good choices, doing the things that are the right way to do things. And I get tickets. Every time I do it, I get tickets. So I go through the week and I'm focused on getting tickets. At the end of the week, we're going to have that raffle. And Harry's sitting there. He didn't do anything, right? We already know he skipped his workout this morning, so he didn't get a ticket. So he doesn't. So he took the week off. He's got one ticket. DJ worked his butt off, man. He's got 50 tickets. I showed up. I kind of cheated. I got 100 tickets. So I'm sitting there and we're going to draw a ticket out. Well, am I guaranteed to have my ticket pulled? No. Harry's lazy butt could still get his ticket pulled and he could win the raffle. And that happens sometimes, or maybe DJ. So we pulled a ticket, boom, there's the result. I worked my butt off all week to get tickets, and I didn't get my ticket pulled. So next week we're going to have the same thing. We're going to have another raffle, same rules apply. What do I do on Monday? Do I go, well, screw it, man, I'm going to be like Harry and do nothing, and right, or what do I really believe and understand about the process? The only thing that I can control are my actions and my behaviors to get tickets. Focus on getting tickets. And then next week, there's going to be another drawing. Am I guaranteed to get my ticket pulled? No. And then the next week, there's going to be another drawing. Am I guaranteed to get my ticket pulled? No. But what do we know about the odds and the statistics? That when I stay committed to doing the things that I know are making me better, making me a good person, making me a better athlete, making me a better leader, what's going to happen over time? I'm going to start to get that ticket pulled. And I'm not going to, and the longer I stay with it, the more times that ticket's going to get pulled. Again, detached, unattached. I cannot control when and how it happens, but I know it's going to happen if I stick to the habits and the behaviors that ultimately lead to long-term success. And I think that's what high performers understand.
I love that, man. I love that. It's that's really good. I mean, you mentioned like, the Starbucks journey, right? From Starbucks to Starbucks, right? So you went
Which,
from that
by the way,
step.
I mean, they should be putting me in an ad for sure, right?
Well, I mean, maybe we should say this, this podcast is sponsored by Starbucks.
Come on, Starbucks. Venti Dreams start at Starbucks. Yeah. Let's go. Let's go.
Right. Venti Dreams. I love it. Well, so I mean, you're there with Gregg at the Starbucks. And then of course, you end up getting, this is right going into 2020, COVID's about to hit. But now they're also preparing, and for the next couple of years of heading to Qatar for the World Cup. So I remember sitting there with you kind of that summer, and you're like about to head off to Qatar, and we have this kind of emerging U.S. men's national soccer team that it's starting to kind of shape. Right? I think there's some optimism at this point. U.S. men's national team has kind of Gregg came on for a reason, right? They were trying to kind of transition that culture and really become a team that can compete at the highest levels. The U.S. women's national soccer team is expected to compete at the highest levels, but
they are the standard, right?
They are the standard.
They've set the standard,
right. And the men, not as much, not yet, if you will. But I think there's a handful of players that are kind of these emerging stars that exist. Christian Pulisic is kind of the face of U.S. men's soccer. Tyler Adams, captain, I think, of that 2022 team. Right?
Yes.
Weston McKennie, I think very popular, very beloved, kind of known as kind of being that box to box midfielder and kind of a true leader.
Yes.
So you have these guys, and there's others, of course, but you have these guys and observing, especially when you kind of came on board, I started paying more attention, right? And noticing that each of these players that I just named, have these moments where they're talking about the importance of peak performance, the importance of mental fitness, mental health, particularly, Christian. He mentioned this, because he had that experience, when he was playing at Chelsea. Now he's at AC Milan, but where he has a lot of pressure to perform because they had high expectations, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm really curious. Now that you're at this point, it's 2022. You're with the team. You're in Qatar. All the friendlies before that. What is that environment like for you? How are you engaging with players like Christian, like players like Tyler and Weston, and maybe even players that are maybe not the stars? Yeah. And they have a different set of pressure. How are you engaging with them? And what are there any kind of special moments or kind of pivotal moments that you feel like you played a role in during that time?
Yeah. I mean, the cool thing about sort of it culminating in 2022 for me and having that be the World Cup is that with a lot of these guys, I had spent 3 years, getting close to and building that, building those relationships over that time. And so, all of a sudden, the dream for everybody was to get to the World Cup. And so now you're there. And the cool thing about our hotel in Qatar, this is the first time that, and probably the first time, the last time that a World Cup will ever operate the way that it did, where it all really took place in one city, right? Think about the next World Cup in 2026. It's going to be spread out across Canada, US, and Mexico. But the 2022 World Cup really, for reference in the US, imagine if we put the entire World Cup in Dallas and the surrounding Dallas area. That was Qatar. And so you had every stadium, you were basically within 30 minutes of every stadium, which meant as a team, we spent the entire month together in one hotel, which meant that we were able to kind of trick out our hotel to make it our home. And so we just built this custom space where we wanted the guys to feel like they could just be home. So when they weren't training, when they weren't competing, we had this amazing players lounge area where the guys could just come, connect, be, relax. So that's where I spent a majority of my time. It's just being in that room and just connecting with guys. And so the special part of that was you just had a lot of time to just dig into, the realness of who these guys were. And they're all at different kind of parts of their journey. You mentioned Weston McKinney. Weston and I were sitting down watching TV one day, and he just opened up to me about, because he was like, hey, I remember you at IMG, right? Because we're kind of talking, because he was in and out of that U7. He didn't make the U17 team, but I remember doing improv with Weston, like when he was like 14. And this kind of like pudgy, hadn't grown into his body yet. And so we started talking about that. And he goes, do you know, I almost quit soccer after IMG. I was like, what? He goes, yeah. He goes, I was in a bad place soccer wise. And then he told me his journey. I had no idea. He was almost done. And then, a different coach came into his life and it changed everything. And then literally like less than 2 years later, he's playing in Schalke in Europe, and his whole trajectory changed. And so what on the outside, funny, I'm watching the field goal kicker for the Detroit Lions this week, who kicked the game winner. And whatever he said, 18 months ago, he was selling bricks, right? He'd given up his kicking dream and he was selling bricks. Wow. And then he got a UFL job, right? This whole UFL, I think is it the UFL league, the spring football? Yeah. And then he kicked 360 yarders this year, and Detroit's kicker blew out his ACL, and this guy got a walk on, and now he's kicking game winners in the NFL. The reality,
that's crazy.
We only, you guys know this, Harry, you know this. All we see is what happens on TV, and what you don't see is the uncertainty of what the real life is behind the scenes. Yeah. And that was true for everybody at the World Cup as well. It's Walker Zimmerman who became such a leader for that 2022 group, who a year previous was having a hard time getting invited into qualifying camps, right? And then how he elevated himself over a year. You've got Matt Turner, who's been our stalwart, national team goalkeeper, who didn't have a Division I college scholarship. He didn't start playing soccer till he was 14. He was on ESPN, like not top 10 for a bad goalkeeping mistake he made in college. Like, this is a guy who is now playing in the English Premier League, and the World Cup goalkeeper who his path to where he was just didn't make sense. And then you've got everyone in between. And I think the cool thing is that at the end of the day, like, they're just people.
Yeah.
And that's why I think the relationship side of things are so important, because it's easy to treat, especially professional athletes, as something supernatural. And so maybe we don't give them as much grace. Maybe we don't think that they deal with vulnerabilities. Maybe we think that they're superhuman. And so we assume that they're okay, when a lot of times they're probably not. And I think back to those 3 years, the most memorable experiences I had in those 3 years, even though the on the field stuff was amazing, it was the real honest and vulnerable connections. Some of the one-on-ones where the guard was down and the tears were out. And it was about, real love and real transformation. And I think that's ultimately why I love doing this work.
That's great. That's really cool. I mean, it sounds like part of this was, and some of your training was spontaneous. Part of it was more built in and, and process driven. Describe that too, in terms of how you worked with the team. Are there things that you did every single day, or was all of this more spontaneous in terms of how you worked with the team?
Yeah, no, it was definitely both. I would say maybe the first year that I came in with the team, it was me probably doing more intentional team sessions with the players when we focused on mindset. We focused on the team dynamic side of things, and then outside of that, specific work, I was always working with Gregg on. He had a very clear vision of what he wanted the internal culture to look like and to feel like, and so I would spend most of my time looking at how we did everything from our time in the hotel to meal rooms to team activities and to training sessions. And it's like, how can we be intentional so that we're really building, we're being intentional about the culture that we're trying to create in everything that we do. And then how I showed up and making myself available to players. And even at the World Cup, how do we recreate this sense of family and connection at the World Cup? And we started having these impromptu family meetings before the night before a game, which became a staple before a game. And so I was always available, right, for players, but then I was also proactively always trying to do things within sort of the ecosystem, if you will, that was intentionally nurturing and trying to foster that culture. And so, yeah, it was a lot of doing, but also just a lot of being in the space and helping kind of create that space, from language to messaging to the pregame hype video that we would show the players. That was one of the things that actually caused me the most stress of any part of the hats that I wore, was making sure that hype video.
That's critical.
You needed John Schultz, man. You needed John Schultz.
I did. Yes. So add producer. I am now a producer because apparently I produced and directed a lot of these videos which a lot of time were rendering up into the team meeting. I was like, we got to go. The meeting started. That was the most stress. Awesome. But it all was a reflection of what is the message? What is the culture? Who are we? Why are we? And how do we do everything that we do?
Yeah. I have one kind of question as we get close to wrapping. A lot of us, that have been in whatever industry we're in, particularly in the corporate space, since 2020 and beyond, there's been so much change in how we kind of on how we work, the future of work, hybrid, et cetera. We've seen companies kind of downsize. We've seen a lot of organizations making different moves, and so there's a lot of change that a lot of people can't really control relative to their future, and from a work component, from an employment component. And I know in your space, in the business of sports, a lot of times as a staff member, you are at the kind of the mercy of, does that head man, head woman, does that GM, does that manager, does that coach, are they there for the long haul, right?
Yeah. And the answer is always no.
yeah, exactly. And very, very seldom, right? And even the ones that are kind of the legends of the game, at some point, that time ends, right? And so, my question is like, obviously Gregg, they moved on from Gregg. He did a tremendous job while he was there.
Yeah.
They make a different, they're making a different move. And of course, it's the staff kind of can suffer from that as well. So when you were going through that and kind of maybe seeing some of the writing on the wall, how did you handle that mentally as somebody who can't really control it? There's no controllable to control there. But you kind of also can make some assumptions on how that may impact you as you move forward. How did you handle that?
Yeah, and I think that's sort of the beauty and the tragedy of high level professional sports. When I talk, usually when I'm working with athletes, usually what they're bringing to me with needing help with is, the uncertainty in their life, right? Stuck with a coach that doesn't like them, stuck at an organization that won't trade them, stuck at, off the field stuff that they can't control, all this stuff. And I was just like, if you're signing up to work in professional sports, you're basically signing up for a life of uncertainty on steroids, right? Because it's like, we all know that control the controllables, Limitless Minds, we talk about ACE, we talk about your attitude, your concentration, your effort. Those are the three things that you control. Outside of that, you control none of it. And which is why, improvisation was so great as a tool, because it's like you're constantly in radical collaboration with reality, not what you want your reality to be, what reality is. And so in professional sports, you have to be at peace with the reality that this could all be gone tomorrow, right? And like, well, and I think to your point, Harry, what the global pandemic taught us was that just doesn't apply to athletes. That applies to everybody.
Right.
And it always has. And here's the reality. It always has. But the whole world got a global pandemic at once to remind everyone that, yeah, to what do you think is certain? Right? To what do you think is certain in your life? Right? Is it your job? Is it your bank account? Is it your health? Is it your relationship? Is it, if you answer yes to any of those things, you're setting yourself up for a big shot to the gut, because none of those things are certain. And so what are the things that are certain? Well, what my attitude is, what I focus on, my concentration, and the effort that I put out there. And so, to go back to your question, like there were so many times, even, during that 3-year stint, Harry, where I would look at a situation and go, if things don't go well today, this could be it. And I remember that happening in the first World Cup qualifying window. We tied our first 2 games where the expectation is that we would win. And then we had to go on the road to Honduras. And there was a good chance that we weren't going to get a result there. And we're losing 1-0 at halftime. And I remember sitting on the sidelines in the first half going, if we lose, they could clean house. Now, whether they would have or not, but I'm thinking, wow, I'm the performance coach and I'm on the sidelines already thinking about the negative results. And I'm like, thank God I'm not playing right now because my head's not in a good space. And so Gregg, thank God, who is a master at staying neutral, was able to go in at halftime, right? Adjust what needed to be fixed and do it with a sense of calm and composure and confidence and belief that just kind of set the tone for the rest of the team. And they went out there and I think we dominated the second half and won 4 or 5-1, 3 points on the road. And it's like, boom. All right, we're off. But the reality was all the time, hey, you're one bad result away from being done. And sadly, that's what happened to Gregg and the national team this summer. But that's also the reality of the profession. And it's also the reality for all of us. It just doesn't always feel that drastic.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned some of these like kind of just negative thoughts that go through our heads. We're obviously in a political season right now where negativity runs rampant. Is there any advice you'd give the listeners here to get through times like that when negativity just surrounds you?
Yeah. Going back to what Trevor talks about, and it takes what it takes, his whole, when he used himself as a guinea pig, where he watched a ton of national news and he listened to sad music and how that had such a negative, unhealthy impact on him. I think it's true, especially during an election season as well. I would say less is more, right? We probably don't need to consume as much, national and international news as we do. I'm not saying we ignore it, but we probably just need to get the facts, know what's going on. And then when it comes to our own sort of mental health and self-care, just that idea, it can be the more you watch the national news, the more helpless you're going to feel, right? Because you're watching the big picture and you're feeling smaller in the process. And I've always loved the quote, think globally, live locally, right? So I care about the world. When we talk about control versus influence, I have zero control over what's happening in the world. I have influence over what's happening in my smaller circles.
Yeah.
And so that's locally. And so I care about what's going on globally, and I'm going to make choices that impact that. But where I have real impact is what I'm doing day to day, locally, in my community, but also in my house, in my family, with my friends, at my place of work, in my, going across the street to the community coffee shop and getting to know the people there, doing stuff in my community that is having an immediate impact in my community. And we know that the more that we do that, the bigger we feel and the less hopeless that we feel as a result. And so I'm going to do my job and my duty and vote in the national election. And regardless of what happens, my real impact is going to be what I choose to do day to day on a local level. And that's where we make an impact. And when you do something that it's face to face and people feel that, well, that means you feel it too. And it starts to feel like we have relevance and we have importance, and that we matter. And that's what all of us want to feel.
It's crazy. Like my pastor at the sermon this weekend talked about influence. He said, be an encourager. You know, he talked about going into, you know, coffee shops or wherever the people that you're around. Talked about, you know, be somebody that's known for their honesty and integrity. Be a relationship first person if you want to have influence, and be a God pleaser, not a people pleaser. Yeah. And so it's just funny when you're talking through that about how you have influence in a time where there's so much negativity. You know, being focused and where your feet are locally and impacting the folks around you is so important. So I really appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah. And so I challenge everyone today after you listen to this podcast is put your shirt on inside out and go into your local coffee shop and make someone smile.
Yeah, put it inside out.
Yeah, or take your shirt off. Or take your shirt off.
Yeah, you know, no shirt, no service, but like the inside out shirt, you're good. But no, this is great, man. I really appreciate it. Before we set you off, like, where can people find you? Where can they find you?
Yeah, well, you'll find me at most local coffee shops here in the St. Louis area. If you want to find me online, I'm at most things on social media, at Live Yes And, LIVE Yes And, Live Yes And. That's my website as well. You'll find me all over Limitless Minds. Let's go. That's great, baby. That's right. And hopefully, you know, not sure when this is going to come out, but hopefully coming out, you know, on Amazon very soon will be that second book, which again is Confidence is Overrated. And hopefully people are going, what's he mean by that? Well, you got to buy the book.
Cliffhanger. So love it.
We'll do a book. We'll do a book reveal, guys. We'll do an interview about that.
Well, yeah, we'll have you on we'll do a part 2 with you when the next book comes out, and we'll break it down. So I love it, man. Well, listen, we appreciate you. We're excited, you know, for our continued work with you, in and at Limitless Minds, and you know, just grateful to know you, man. We appreciate you. And for audience members, remember, you don't have to be sick to get better.